Much. We continue right now with our Fiscal Summit with a look at the 4 possible scenarios for dealing with the fiscal cliff. Joining us on set right now for that and more is David Cote. He is the chairman and CEO of Honeywell. Of course, our guest host this hour is former U.S. Senator Sam Nunn. And David, thanks so much for coming in.
Happy to do it.
You have been somebody who, for a long time, has been talking about how important it is for us to get a hold of our budget issues, for us to behave a little bit better. You've been a long-time proponent of Simpson-Boles. And we just heard an idea from Sam Nunn, who he said maybe what they can do to avoid this fiscal cliff is kick the can down the road 6 months, but substitute in a Simpson-Boles or a Rivlin-Domenici, one of those other plans, and that kicks in 6 months. It gives some political cover. What do you think about an idea like that?
Oh, I like that idea. I mean, as we approach this fiscal cliff, which is real, and I've said many times, this is a potential disaster or a potential opportunity. And if playing with the debt ceiling the way they did was playing with fire, this is playing with nitroglycerin. And they need to understand that. And there's a series of, I guess, outcomes you could get. One is let the fiscal cliff happen, which I truly believe is a disaster and would create a recession worse than what the CBO predicts. I'm not an economist, but when I see how things feel out there right now, it's not good. Second best alternative would be to just kick the can down the road so the cliff doesn't happen, but the uncertainty lingers because you have no idea what's going to happen. The best outcome would be that they actually solve it in this lame duck session, but I agree with Sam, that's impossible. They just can't do that. So you say, okay, what's in between where I can get enough market certainty that I can feel comfortable that these guys are actually being responsible with the country's finances? And to me, that's where that alternative plays. I like it a lot because it gives you the time that you need to think, but it creates something that's real that people start focusing on. And I think Sam's point during the break was right, is people start focusing on that instead of thinking about where they were, and it causes a different mental dynamics. I like it a lot.
And Sam, your point is that this is something politicians could actually vote for. It works for them. It provides cover.
Well, you need cover for a lot of folks, and they can say, look, I hate Simpson-Boles. I don't like Domenici Rivlin. I don't like the combination. But look at this abomination that we've got coming, and that's a fiscal cliff that's a disaster.
Right.
So it's a substitute. You're voting for something you may not like in preference to something you hate. And I think that can be explained to all your constituents.
Hey, David, in terms of this uncertainty, your business, when you guys have board meetings, does this come into play in terms of your conversations?
I would say it's not just a board meeting. It's how we're running the company now. When we look at democracies around the world are in gridlock right now. Japan, India, Europe, the U.S., they're all in gridlock. Nothing's happening. So when you see something like this occurring, where there's this big issue that's confronting everybody and nobody's doing anything, you don't see any progress, you find yourself saying, I'm going to hold back a bit. There's no sense hiring right now. Let attrition work for you. There's no sense investing right now. Wait and see what's going to happen. And it causes everything to slow down. You're already feeling it. It's already happening. So we need to start facing into things. And because we're not, it's causing most businesses to say, let's hold back. I was at the Business Roundtable last week, so 100 or so of the top CEOs around the country. Everybody feels the same way. We're saying, well, we've got to wait and see what those guys do. Who the heck knows what's going to happen here?
But is there a situation where you have demand in some place in your business and you say to yourself, you know what, I'm still not going to hire?
Yes.
There is.
Yes. At the end of the day.
Wrong answer.
You're not.
It's not the wrong answer.
Wrong answer.
No, but we've had people come on the set that said as long as there's demand. No, we've had people come on the set that says, if there's demand, we'll go do it. And then we've had other people come in and say the opposite.
But you've had so many CEOs say that.
No, demand makes a difference, but you look at where you think demand is going. Right.
And
so
what's causing
right
the
now,
demand
if you look
to
at
not
it and you say, geez, 6 months ago, my orders rate versus last year was up 6%. Now it's up 2%. Demand's still there, but am I going to hire in the face of that kind of a curve? No.
I saw something
I'm going to hold back.
55% of small business owners said they wouldn't hire given, I forget what it was. It was either health care or regulations or something. It's like 55%. They can't all be lying, even if you just cut it in half.
I'm not suggesting they are. I'm just saying Barry Diller on Tuesday said that he didn't feel this sense of uncertainty in terms of how he's managing his business.
Boy,
David, is that real? Are those real numbers, the 6% and the 2%?
No. But I would say here's one of the things that I've observed about short cycle orders right now, and I think this is true for most companies. If you're in a place like Europe, it's been negative all year and has stayed negative. If you're in a place like the U.S., you started off the year with a more positive percentage, and that percent of improvement has slowly declined during the course of the year. And I think that's true for just about everybody. It's why we're all being cautious. You say, okay, if I just keep drawing those lines, it doesn't get you to the right spot. So I'm going to be careful. I'm going to wait to see what Washington does, and do they actually sort this out. Now,
what could Washington do that would either mess you up or make you think, okay, this is great, I should go ahead with some of these plans?
If they pick one of those first two alternatives, where they either say, and you do hear this from some folks about just let it happen, and then that'll give the impetus to make something work here. Or if they just say, we need 6 more months, but we got nothing to replace it with. Those are both bad. The one that would cause you to say, gee, let's think about investing now, would be that third or fourth alternative. And the fourth, I just don't think is practical. The third one that Sam outlined, I do believe, is the right one. And if you take a look at the amount of money on the sidelines now, whether it's what companies have or what investors have, there's a lot of potential money to invest. It's just everybody's scared right now.
David, what's your effective tax rate? Do you know?
26.5%.
26.5%.
That's up there.
That's up there.
Yeah.
What would it have to get you to really move the needle for you?
Well, half a point makes a difference. So
right.
I've never thought about it that way. But I'm not sure what it feels like there's another question to.
No.
You and Joe are going to attack each other as soon as we leave.
There is a. No, I'm just going to say objection. You're leading the witness. That's all I'd ever say. I mean, I could just have a pool objection. You're leading the witness. The problem that I see, and it's a great idea, but when you get Simpson-Bowles and you got, you're going to do it for 6 months, how are you going to get to agree on the entitlement reform? How are you going to get to, that's on the left, how are you going to get to the Republicans to agree even on a 3-to-1 if it's a 1%, replacing cuts with taxes? Well, both sides are so entrenched.
Simpson-Boles has a limitation on entitlement growth, 1% above the growth of GNP. You can make that enforceable to the committees, not the details. You're not going to be able to get that done in December, but you can make that target, or 1.5%, whatever you choose.
How about the Republicans?
You can make it enforceable by the committees. They have to bring it out.
Now, how about you got the Norquist guys that can't vote for that?
Well, at some point, people just have to have the courage to say Grover's pledge is outmoded. We got to save the country. You got to put the country before your political party. You got to put the country before your political base.
And then we just heard Larry Summers. Okay, so we're going to have arguments on entitlements. We're going to have arguments on those taxes. Then we're going to have arguments on that 28% marginal rate. They'll lower it to 28% in Simpson-Boles. Where did it go on Domenici and Rivlin? That was down 26 or something, wasn't it?
It was.
Are you going to get Democrats to agree to that?
Well, I think Democrats would love to tackle the tax expenditures if they can get a huge, big package. Where the Democrats have problems is on the entitlement side. And there, I think there has to be an entitlement approach in the same package.
I mean, I don't know historically what the lowest marginal rate top bracket we've ever had was. Do you know? But it was no way it was anywhere near 28%. And they're already talking about, the Eisenhower years. We did 90. They're already talking about historically this is way too low. I don't see any of the things in Simpson-Boles ever being palatable to both sides.
To the point that Sam was making before, though, I mean, there's moving parts inside of this. So if you just look at that rate, you're missing all the tax expenditure piece.
I know, but that still doesn't.
And to Sam's point earlier on, you collect $2 trillion.
Everybody's got to get something they want.
But it doesn't make sense. Just because they talk about it that way doesn't mean we should.
David, you said, though, that your biggest concern with this idea would be that this is just another thing, another can that gets kicked down the road in 6 months. How do we make them stick to this one if they're not going to stick to the last one that was the ultimate end of the day? You must have this, or you're going to fall off a cliff.
Well, this is the part I found kind of interesting, being on as you know, I was a member of the Simpson-Bowles Commission, and we would talk, and I tried to make myself really conversant with the numbers because I didn't want to be Mickey the Dunce, the only guy who didn't know what was going on at the table. So in general, I was able to follow the dialogue until one day we were sitting there and everybody for about 45 minutes spent their time talking about caps, triggers, and a bunch of other words I didn't understand. And we finally got to the end, and I remember asking, I don't really get all this, but it sounds like you're trying to protect yourself against yourselves. And the answer was, yes, that is exactly right. It's because you can't encumber a future Congress. So they can do anything they want when the when the time comes. So
wait a second.
always
So
have
you
that
can have
risk.
this deal before January. January comes, it's a whole new Congress, and they can say, yeah,
right,
never mind.
So they always have that right. So that's why I say there's still a little bit of risk to it. But you look at this in terms of probability, right? If you've taken 80% of the risk off the table because now you have something in place, that puts you in a much better place than if you've got 100% of the risk on the table because nobody's done anything.
And you've got to have more public understanding. I mean, there's no question there has to be an education here. And that's what's so bad about the political campaigns now, because they're saying, one side's saying 2 + 2 is 6, the other side's saying 2 + 2 is 8, right. And then they're arguing about, which one's wrong. Well, they're both wrong. None of it adds up.
You made a really good point, Sam, also, where you said the Congress and all elected officials have to put their country first. You signed something to Grover Norquist, but you also made a pledge to your country.
Yeah, Grover's not part of the Constitution. And you basically pledged to defend the Constitution of the country and protect the nation. That's what you pledged. Now, is Grover's pledge more important than that? I don't think so.
But by the way, the same is true on both left and right.
Yeah,
here.
Exactly.
Because when you recommend something like that you raise the retirement age by a year, 75 years from now, when my grandchildren will already be retired, and the outcry begins, say this is ridiculous. And I've often kind of felt everybody ought to take a pledge to take no pledges, that would be the best way to do
I subscribe to that. And the entitlement point that Dave makes is exactly right. When we passed Social Security and we passed Medicare, the life expectancy was somewhere in the mid-60s. Today, the life expectancy is between 78 and 82, somewhere in that range. And we basically haven't made the adjustments. Yep. Now, you can't live with that. Now, was that a commitment maybe implied 20, 30, 40 years ago? We've got to take care of the future. It's a moral obligation to our children.
Exactly.
We're not going to leave our children in a situation they can live with. And I think most people, from a moral point of view, will go for a deal that can truly protect the children and grandchildren. People love this country. They haven't given up on it.
And that argument hasn't been made. That's getting back to your point on 2 + 2 adds to either 6 or 8. That argument about this is important for the country, here's why. Take a look at this in total. Everybody has to give its taxes, its entitlements, its discretionary spending, it's everything. We need to do this at the same time and invest in infrastructure and math and science education. We need to do this together. That argument is not being made by politicians today.
Then they're doing us all a disservice.
Yes. Yes.
I wish people would talk like you two.
Yeah, but we back them up. I mean, we elect them. We elected in 2010. We sent a bunch of guys that were there for a reason, and that's why we had the first debt ceiling issue. They weren't going to raise it another. They want spending increases stopped immediately, but they were sent there for what spawned the rise of that movement? What happened in the first 2 years of the Obama presidency?
Well, I understand the movement. There's no question there's a lot of sentiment out there for, stop the world, I want to get off. But
I think these guys are arguing 2 + 2 = green. They're not even coming up with a number. They're not even it's not even, this does not compute. They're not even speaking the same language.
Well, and I understand the sentiment of the Tea Party. I mean, there are a lot of folks out there very sincere, and they're fed up. But it's like the dog that caught the car. I mean, at some point you got to govern. This is a country where you have to govern. And you've got to make some compromises. You've got to listen to the other side. This is a big country, a lot of diverse views. We're not going to all get our way. And people should remember, even if they think their party is 100% right, the other 100% wrong, after this election, there's almost no chance that one party is going to be able to impose its will on the other. There's got to be people who will work together. Yep. And what we have to do in Common Sense America is get behind the folks in the House and Senate who are trying to work together. That's what Dave Cody's doing.
Well, you're a Georgia Democrat. It's easy for you to say. You're one of the good ones.
Gentlemen, thank you both so much.